The devil you know versus the devil you don't. Hey guys, in this video, I want to answer a question I get asked all the time, which comes from people who are contemplating returning to a former employer. And is that a good idea? Should you do it? Should you not? What are the pros and cons there? And what I'd like to do in this video is just raise a couple of areas of potential concern or question asking that you may not be asking to help make the right decision. So those of you who've been watching my previous videos, you know I'm a straight shooter and I like to be really upfront with it. So let me start by saying this. In most cases, for most people, going back to a former employer is a mistake. And there's a simple reason for that. There was a reason that you left in the first place, right? No matter how we like to rewrite history sometimes in our minds, and I'm very guilty of that. My wife will always tell me that, I will turn myself from the villain into the hero of so many things in our past, over and over again, to paint a rosier picture. And we do tend to do this with former companies when we're in a distressed place ourselves, right? So I'm in a bad place in my career and I look back with rosy, gazes towards a previous employer. I think only about the great team, right? And the amazing successes I had there. And I don't think about, the toxic boss or the fact that I was routinely working, 6.5 days out of 7, right? I forget that stuff because I'm painting it, with this excessively optimistic brush. And so if you, for example, have been in a job search for a while, right, and things are not working out great, and you know that you still have a good relationship with a previous boss, and you know that the door is always open, I know it can seem very tempting to say, yeah, you know what, let me just go back. It's definitely better than what I have now, right? But the problem is that there's a reason. There was a reason that you left. And no one really leaves a job and goes through the tumult of, having to find a new one and build those relationships and all that if there wasn't a clear discomfort that was there, right? So I want you to honestly ask yourself, what was the need that wasn't, being met at this previous place? Were you not feeling heard? Did you, not feel like you had any leeway? Were you being micromanaged every step of the way? Was the culture bad? Was there no internal growth plan, right? No future there that caused you to leave? What was the real reason? Because when you go back, chances are that problem will still be there, right? And it makes no sense to go back to an employer if you're also going to take on these old problems. A new employer is not going to suffer from that, right? So why not, just take the extra pain a little bit and just get to the other end? So really ask yourself, what was the need that wasn't being met there? And is it something that can potentially be solved now versus when you originally left? The other thing to really think about here that almost no one does is, what is the overall strength of my relationships at that company? Here's what I mean. You may have a boss who has always loved you and would welcome you in with open arms. But what about people who are not your boss? What about coworkers? What about heads of other departments? Is there anyone that you rubbed the wrong way? Is there anyone that you left in the lurch when you left? Is there anyone who could have been left with a bad taste in their mouths? You've got to take into account the overall health of your relationships at this place. Because if all you have is a boss and you go back in there and the boss leaves a year from now or 2 years from now, as happens all the time. By the way, speaking as a career coach, the number one reason people will work with me is because they lose a boss at a company. So if we know that, okay, what's the answer? If it's healthy overall, great. If it's not, again, that should be a big, big warning sign and a big reason for you not to return, to a previous employer. Okay. Here's the other thing I want you to think about. Survival versus purpose or fulfillment. What is the balancing act there at this previous employer? In other words, are you going back because, your rent or mortgage is 2 months late and you're going to be kicked out and it's just purely survival? So it's like 95% survival, 5% purpose. Nothing wrong with that, but just honestly figure out the ratio. Is it 80-20? Is it 70-30 survival versus purpose? What is it? Because the lower the amount of intrinsic purpose there is in this job, the faster you're going to be dissatisfied again once the immediate crisis is over, once the immediate survival sort of part of it is over, right? So really, you know, put a number to it. What's the ratio here? Survival versus purpose. And that'll tell you something, you know. If it's near 100% survival, do it if you have to. Of course, I have a family, right? You got to do sometimes you got to act out of pure survival to ensure that you guys have a future. I know that. Okay, I'm not denigrating that. I'm not judging that if that's where you're at. But ask yourself that, okay? Because if there's really no purpose at all, you know, do you want to go back on a full-term basis? Is there a way to maybe come back on a contract basis or a part-time basis or a remote basis, right? Or a work-from-home basis, right? Maybe that's what you do here. You know, maybe you come back in a consulting capacity or you come back in some smaller time frame so that you can still continue making inroads towards a new place. Because the truth is this, in most cases, it's not about the devil you know versus the devil you don't. That's a false analogy, okay? If you're thinking about a former employer in terms of being a devil, maybe we need to find some angels right now, you know, and they do exist. So don't let cynicism drive you back into the arms of a place that you know didn't work for you the first time. It's almost impossible that it's going to work for you a second. Having said that, if you do decide to make that decision, do it in this informed way. Use this advice, right? Go through it. Honestly, ask yourself, what were the needs that weren't being met? What is the overall strength of my relationships at this place? And, you know, the third one is the survival versus purpose ratio, right? Where do I fall there? The less purpose you're going back into it with, the quicker you're going to be dissatisfied again. So I hope that has been helpful. I hope that will help you with your decision making. I thank you guys very much for learning with me. I will talk to you soon. Thanks. Bye-bye.